Okay, let's look at an example. This is another example of mine. It's kind of a complicated one. But I wanted to give you a more complicated example. And this is one that I happen to know pretty well because I wrote it. This is a piece I wrote a while ago. It's for string quartet with a whole bunch of electronic stuff happening in it. So this is a kind of a 8 or 9 movement thing called Kinesthesia. It's in 2 parts. This is the 7th movement. And so it's kind of like the big climax of the whole thing. And there's something I do in here that it creates a sense of tension and release that I wanted to point out. I kind of hate showing my own stuff so much like I did in this class. It feels like I have this like huge ego, but it's just really easy to explain my own stuff because I can tell you exactly what I did to create that kind of a feeling. So my ego isn't actually that big. It's just convenient examples. So with that said, let's look at some of my music. So in this piece, there's a lot of chaos. It's a very chaotic movement. It's the big kind of finale. It's an hour-long piece, and this movement is the kind of big finale of the whole thing. There's one more movement, but it's like basically a kind of a breath. It's like super quiet, super chilled out. So this is the big ending. It's also quite long, so I'm going to play it and kind of talk over it, which, again, I hate doing, but bear with me. So here we go. Okay, so keep your ear in that violin riff. Because I'm going to use it to do a little trick in a bit, in kind of a while. So I'm going to let this play for a while so that you really get the full sense of what I'm trying to do. I'll chime back in again when we get to the relevant part, but without the whole build-up, I don't think you'll really get it. So I'm going to shut up for a few minutes now. Here's kind of a pedal point thing that I did right in the violin, which is creating a big sense of tension here. So we're kind of waiting for it to go back to that chaos. It's really a rhythmic build-up, you know? But what's going to happen is we're not going to get that chaos back. I'm going to extend the tension for pretty much the next 5 minutes. Now it's going to get even more chaotic, different kind of chaotic though. So now, for the next little bit, everything's basically going to fall apart. I'm just building on this sense of tension. And there are these musical elements that are going to come in rhythmically and harmonically and form-wise that just make everything fall apart. So this is not the end that's coming up now. This is the release, actually. And the release is all going to be done just with a snare drum. That's what I was trying to do here. So we get really quiet, and we're going to get some violins in a second. They're going to kind of introduce a new harmony, but it's not really going to be resolved. So here's my new harmony. The resolution is actually going to come from two places. One is the snare drum that's about to come in. It's the thing that finally gives us a rhythmic sense of pulse that we haven't had since the very, very beginning, 6 minutes ago. So it's going to kind of resolve it rhythmically by just giving us this backbeat and nothing more, but it has a very welcoming feeling. So here it is, your snare drum resolution. And suddenly it feels like, maybe we're going to be okay amidst all of this chaos, like pure, violent chaos. Now there's one other thing coming here that I want to point out. There's our violin melody from the very beginning that's come back, but it's shifted by an eighth note. So I did a little meter changes here to create a sense of release here, because now that violin is more lined up on the beat than it was before. Before, it started on the downbeat and made for a weird syncopation, so the accent was on the offbeat. Now the accent's back on the downbeat because there's a little pickup to it. In other words, it's somewhat simplified. And it fits with the harmony that we didn't have before. And now we get a nice clean harmony. It's kind of resolving this whole thing. This is kind of resolving like an hour's worth of music that I don't want to play for you the whole hour. So this little beeping thing is actually kind of the transition to the next movement, which is this really quiet, ethereal thing forever, which we don't need to go into. So the point is, there's a whole bunch of techniques used to create that sense of tension throughout a whole 6 or 7 minutes of tension, and then this very soft and subtle release. It's a lot like what I showed you a while ago, where we said sometimes the release is not the big louder thing, but it's the more subtle thing. And that can be a warmer, more welcoming release than hitting someone over the head with it. And in this particular movement, I kind of had to have a more quiet, subtle release because I've been hitting the listener over the head with a sledgehammer with all the chaos throughout the whole movement that I had nowhere to go. I couldn't make it any bigger. So I chose a release that pulled in, got quieter, and felt pretty rewarding, I think, to me anyway. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's talk about how this applies into film music.